There we go. Thank you. Thank you so much for the introduction. And definitely, it is a pleasure and an honor for me to be with you here tonight. I'm looking forward to the conversation. Um, but yeah, came to the United States in 2006. My asylum was granted in 2007. And coming from Chad in Central Africa, I grew up speaking French. And so all my education was in French. Then I went to higher education in Cameroon, which is the neighboring country to Chad, where I was born, and met my wife there, who is also from Chad, but we did not know each other. And so we met in Cameroon. We finished there. We came back home, got married, and then moved to the United States to seek political asylum. Um, and I am definitely very honored to be with you here tonight to share a little bit of the little that God has given me to be able to share. Um, in this world, there is just so much happening and going on that we're constantly looking at what can we do as a community, as a society together. Now, our world lives in continuous and a number of crises since the beginning of the times. And of the many crises, some are getting better, though they are not where we would like to see them, and some crises are getting worse. Let's take the child mortality, for instance. One of the world's greatest crises, killing people, mostly killing children under the age of 5, mostly in developing countries, and in a place like where I was born and I grew up and where I come from. But the child mortality has been getting better. In fact, according to a report that was produced by UNICEF in 2022, they did a study between 2000 and 2022, and they found out that the child mortality rate has decreased by 51%. Even though the number still remains high, that decrease is a move towards a positive direction, right? Now, as I'm sharing some of these statistics and these numbers with you, keep in mind that these numbers are dated prior to some of the seasons that we're living now. So let's keep that in mind as we hear these statistics and these realities. And so that means these days, more children are living and passing the age of 5 than it used to be the case. And that's a positive direction. But still, as members of this world, of this community, there is still a lot that we need to do. The United Nations, in their Sustainable Development Goal number 1, which is to fight the poverty around the world. And they did produce a report also in 2022, looking into the number of people living with $1.9 a day. They have seen that the numbers have gotten better. In fact, in 2015, the number of the people globally living with at $1.9 dropped by 10%. Now, that number in 2015 was 16% higher in 2010, and it was 36% higher in 1990. So we're moving towards a positive direction. In fact, in 2023, they have found out that about 700 million people live at above $2 a day. Now, when we look at 700 million people of the over 8 billion people worldwide living at now over $2 a day, to be exact, $2.15 a day, that's a move. It's a progress, but it's still a lot, because if we have 700 million people living at about $2.15 a day, there is a way for us to go. But it's a positive direction, and it's moving towards a positive direction. In their development goal, United Nations again, in their development goal number 6, which is to give access to safe drinking water to more people globally, they have made a progress. That number from 2015 to 2022 went from 69% only of the global population having access to clean, safe drinking water to 73%. That's more people having access to safe drinking water. From 69 in 2015 to 73% of the global population. But still, that means 27% of people still do not have access to clean water. But again, let's keep it in perspective here. It's a move towards a positive direction. Meanwhile, when we talk about forced displacement, which is what we're here to talk about, numbers are not encouraging. They are so discouraging that when we look at the statistics between 2021 and 2025, the total number of the forcibly displaced people worldwide was about 89 million worldwide, and that was in 2021. But then look at that number, the forcibly displaced people in 2025, 123 million people forcibly displaced. That's about over 27% increase of more people being forcibly displaced globally. Now, we talked about 700 million people living at or below $2.15 in terms of poverty. Huge number. But we agreed together that it's moving towards a positive direction. Now, in terms of people being forcibly displaced, which is either based on conflict, war, the greediness of those who lead our different countries around the globe, the calamities, so let it be drought or flood and all sorts of things, people are being forced to leave where they call home. And that number is getting crazy over time. 27 million refugees in 2021 to 42 million refugees in 2025. Now, some of you who have been following what's going on around the globe, you know that there is a war going on in Sudan over the last 3 years. Now, the number of the estimated people who have been forcibly displaced from Sudan is estimated at over 14 million people in 3 years from just one country. Now, if you add to that what's going on in Ukraine for the last few years, in Democratic of Congo for the years, we're just heading towards the wrong direction when it comes to people being uprooted. And that's where World Relief comes in. Now, World Relief is a global Christian nonprofit organization that focuses on engaging the world, boldly engaging the world's greatest crisis in partnership with the church and the community. Now, that means we engage in crises related to forcibly displacement, to the global displacement, to poverty, to floods, to drought, to development in general. How do we come in, work with the church to help people to have a better life? So it's all of that, all those crises we are a part of. And that's over for 80 years that we've been engaged in those greatest crises globally. And we serve in 8 different countries outside of the United States. In the United States, we have about 21 offices that serve refugees and do other things with people. Now, in Western Washington, we have 3 offices, which since 1979 has been created in place to serve those who were fleeing war in Southeast Asia. Now, since 1979, we have evolved not only to serve those who were fleeing war in Southeast Asia, but to serve many more people who have been forcibly displaced. And so refugees, other immigrants, asylum seekers, and asylees like myself when I came with my wife back then. And that's what we've been doing in the community, in this Western Washington location. And all of that is to help people to rebuild a sense of life. Some of you have traveled around, and even though you were not displaced, you went on your own. Sometimes it's for touristic reasons, sometimes it could be for work. But when you find yourself in a different place. You are in a vulnerable place where sometimes even asking a question or a guidance to something, you feel so belittled. Now, just think about those who not willingly have to go and they find themselves in our community. We call them our new neighbors. And that's the work that we do here in Western Washington. Now, our vision behind doing that work is to see every refugee and immigrant who comes into this community in Western Washington to be welcomed by community, rooted in community, and empowered for community, because that's the end goal. It's for people to feel like they do belong, that they are loved, that they are cared for. But once that happened, they start investing back into that very community. And so working together for them to feel like they belong, empowered to give back into their community, because community is much bigger than any single one of us. Now, when we talk about refugees that we serve, refugees are people who, based on either their political views or race or nationality or affiliation with any social group, have been forced to cross an international border and to seek refuge. And it's, religion and all sorts of 5 categories that can qualify someone as a refugee. In Western Washington, the work that we do is more focused on refugees, other immigrants, and asylees and asylum seekers. But tonight, I want to talk a little bit about refugees themselves, the process. And that will help us with the conversation later in the season that we're in our country. When we're talking about refugees, what does that mean for many of us? And what words are we throwing around? The process for anybody to be a refugee and be resettled in our community is a very, very lengthy process, a very lengthy process. Now, first we have to know that they have to leave their own country, cross an international border, and find themselves into another country. When they get there, they get registered by the United Nations High Commissioner of Refugees, and they have to go through an intense process of interviews to make sure that whatever they are claiming to be the reason for the persecution which led them to leave their country is correct, and that they are who they say that they are. Then they get referred to to some of the countries that resettle refugees, of whom United States is one of those countries. And they go through another lengthy process of interview with different agencies of the government, comparing what they are saying after going through several interviews with different people. Then they go through health screening and all sorts of things before the government clears them to be resettled in the United States. And when they get here, we, as an agency, meet them at the airport, we pick them up, and then we, together with the community, try to figure out how do we then walk alongside these new neighbors in our community? How do we provide a space for them to feel a part of who we are as a community? The services that we offer when refugees get here, and again, when you hear me using the word refugee, take it as a very versatile word where you can plug in a refugee or asylee or an asylum seeker or other vulnerable immigrants in our community. But I will be referring to refugees. When we pick up a refugee from the airport, we provide housing. We help the children enroll in schools. We help the adults enroll in ESL classes, job classes. We help them put together their resumes. We help them to seek jobs, and we take them to interviews and so on. Help them to find dentists and family doctors, to simple things like how do you take a public transportation? Now, this is why we're talking about the vulnerability through which people find themselves in. Cultural shocks. They have to go through learning the new culture that they are a part of. And this is also where I usually take offense when people want refugees to assimilate. Refugees do not and should not assimilate. They integrate. Because the beauty of our society is when we bring that diversity together. Assimilation means that you abandon everything that is your identity, the who you are. You let that go and you take a brand new one. So you're wearing a different coat. You are a total different person. How can we have a better society if we want everybody to be the same? And so when we talk about refugees and immigrants, we talk about a process of integration. And integration can take a very long time. Some people can get on their feet and start doing things right away. Some may have other difficulties, which is not just about the refugees, but also every single one of us. We have some developmental delays and all sorts of things that we all, as human beings, keeping in mind that we are all created to the same image. Therefore, the same things that we can see in other person are also the things that can happen to another person. And so our difference is either through our accents, through the languages that we speak, the countries that we come from, do not predetermine us to have something, a particular etiquette that can be attributed to us. And so those challenges that we can see in our community can also be the challenges that refugees and immigrants come with in our community. Now, over the last 10 years, the United States, as a nation that used to welcome refugees and immigrants, have welcomed 540,000 refugees. This is just the number of refugees, not all sorts of immigrants, not asylum seekers, but just the refugees. Those who have been processed overseas, flown in by the United States government, and who have been served. So 540,000 people resettled in the United States over the last 10 years. 24,000 of them came to Washington State. And we, World Relief Western Washington, have served almost 9,000 of those people over the last 10 years. Keeping also in mind that Western Washington, World Relief Western Washington has 3 office locations. Our main office is in Kent, the King County, and that's our largest office because we've been operating there since 1979. Just over 4 years ago, we opened a second office in Bellingham, so Whatcom County. And in March of 2023, we opened our office here in Thurston County, which we are happy to have Natalie lead our efforts here as we serve refugees, and she's part of this community as well. And so thanks again, Natalie, for everything that you're doing to create that space of bringing the community together for refugees to feel that they do belong. These numbers were the numbers of the last 10 years. Now, for some of you also who have been following the news and what's happening, the landscape of refugee resettlement have changed. And right now, refugees are not coming into the United States. They are not being allowed in the United States, even though, by all odds, they are the safest people to enter into the United States based on all the screenings that they go through. They are deemed not to be safe for us, and we're going to be talking about a few of those reasons later on to demystify it together. But we, Western Washington, don't just do the refugee arrival, picking people from the airport and helping them to root in their new community. We also serve those who have arrived months and years prior to that year. Now, last year in 2024, we served 1,578 people who arrived. But the total number of people that were served through our different programs and services was almost 10,000. So that means about 84% of people that we served were not the newly arrived people in the community. They were refugees and immigrants who are already in our community. And that makes a difference. Because as we're talking about no arrivals, some people were asking, would you guys close your doors? Are you gonna be around? Yes, we do. Because you know what? Right here in Thurston County, for just over 2 years that we opened the office, it took us a few months, 4 to 5 months before we received our first families into Thurston County. But since we opened the office, we have 185 people that were resettled here, that we picked up from the airport since we opened the office. Now, all these people are still here, part of this community. They are in different stages of their integration within the community. there is still so much work that needs to be done with them. In fact, I said that I arrived in 2006. My asylum was granted in 2007. That's what, about 19 years ago? But guess what? It's only last year and a half that I learned of something called homecoming. Because I never had a 17-year-old son, right? So it took me that long to find out. And the reason I found out was that my son was so stressed on an evening trying to go to this thing called homecoming. And I had no idea what it is. And I asked him, what is stressing you out? And he's like, Daddy, I need to go to homecoming. I said, what is homecoming? And he's like, homecoming is where we, the senior from high school, go out and spend some time. And therefore, I need to dress good. And he's not a guy who loves to dress. That's the reason why he was so stressed, right? Now, since I learned, I kept on talking to my staff about it, that our process of learning is that huge. So as you're walking alongside families, each year their children move into different grade, different schools. So be mindful of what to warn them about, what they should keep in mind so that they support their children better. And that's part of the things that we continue to do in the community together as families transition in different parts or stages of their integration within the community. And so these 185 people are still part of this community. They have arrived less than 2 years ago, and therefore there is still a lot that needs to be done with them. And so we're doing work, and we need every single one to be able to do that work. Now, I earlier said that, that we're going to come back in the season in which we are right now. Now, since refugees have not been coming, the work that we do in the community is let's focus. Let's go deeper and wider in our relationships with the people who are in the community. Not only with the welcoming community, but also with those that we have welcomed, because that is our calling as an organization, is to show compassion, love, and care as we walk alongside our new neighbors. And here is a good thing about it. Working with refugees and immigrants is a mutually transformative relationships, because every single person, no matter where they come from, when you get closer to them, there is something that you learn from another human being who was created like you. So you discover yourself, but also you discover something new about somebody else. And this is why the work together with the community and the church as we walk alongside our new neighbors is really important. It was Rick Steve, whom I'm sure many of you in the room know. Travel with Rick Steve? Yeah, right? Oh, yeah. It was Rick Steve who was challenging, in one of the podcasts, he was challenging people who think of refugees as not the safe people, not people to get around, and that you shouldn't be around them, we shouldn't be welcoming them. And he was challenging that thought process, that the only reason why some people think or villainize refugees and immigrants is because they don't get out of their own bubble. And he said this, which was very interesting to me. When we get closer to other people, we come back with a different view, because when we discover them, we come back without demonizing those people. And as we get closer to them, we leave them without demonizing us, because we found out about ourselves, the better things about ourselves. And the reality through that is that proximity changes perspective and priorities. And it is important for all of us to get close to each other, because we find some things about ourselves. And so in this season, we've been going deeper and wider in our relationships with others, as refugees are not coming into the community, and we invite everybody to be a part of it. And so as we were doing this, we went back and visit families and having conversations around tea and things with them. And these are the things that they were saying, that we need to find out more about school. We need to have better jobs or change jobs. Now that I have a year of work in the American setting, professional setting, I want to update my resume and maybe find another job and move up the ladder and things. And so these are the things that people in our community are saying. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we are in a different season. And so much have changed. So much have changed. Resettlement of refugees have changed. As you know, since January 20th, there was an executive order that was signed by the new administration that dismantled the refugee admission programs altogether. That was in January 20th. But that order did not go into effect until January 27th. And so we still have a week to welcome people until the door is closed. We picked up our last family on January 23rd. Now, every refugee who comes into the community, because we have this partnership with the federal government, we have some money that is given to us to serve them for those initial couple weeks, months. January 23rd, we picked up our last families from the airport. January 24th, the stop work order was issued, which means on that day, which was a Friday, we found out about the stop work order towards the end of the day on Friday, that we have no access to any federal funds to serve everybody who has arrived. Now, we were set to resettle 1,650 people in Western Washington. By that point, we had 573 people who arrived. Now, that stop work order means that everybody who has arrived, we have no access to any fund to serve them. Now, on top of that, everybody who was projected to arrive, because our budget was built around how many people our capacity can take. And so all of that caused us to have over 32% of our funding cut from the federal government. And we were forced to let go of 29% of our staff. And that's the season that we're in. So the major funding cut has changed the way that we do our work in the community. But also, we live in a time of tension, the social and political uncertainties. I mean, we live in the same world, right? You wake up one day, you hear something different, and you try to figure out by the time, maybe by the end of the day, you figure out a little bit of it. Okay, tomorrow I'm going to wake up, and this is how I'm going to approach it. You wake up in the morning, whatever you thought you figured out, it's no longer there for you. And so you have to go back again and try to figure it out. We're talking about mass deportation. We're talking about changes. In fact, next week, even the citizenship exam, I mean, most of you in the room, if you're not an immigrant, you have not taken a citizenship exam. So you may not know what I'm talking about unless you work with people who have done it. But there used to be a book that has 100 questions about United States. And refugees and immigrants who want to do a naturalization have to study that. They go to the judge for their citizenship. They would be asked 10 questions. And if you get 6 out of the 10 questions correct, then you pass. And it's the last part of the citizenship. It's not the only thing, right? It's the last part of it. Once you pass 6 out of the 10 questions, then you get your citizenship granted. Starting next week, the 100 questions will go up to 120, and you will be asked 20 questions, and you have to answer 12 correctly. Now, even of the 120, some that used to be part of the 100 have been changed, right? These days, I walked in here with fear because I know that I look different. I know that I speak with accent. And if anything happened as I was driving down, I live in Puyallup, by the way, so I drove over for this meeting. If anything happened and I get pulled over, I may be asked to prove my legality of being in the United States. And since January, I go everywhere with my US passport with me because I never know what can happen. I never know what can happen. And many of you in the room may not even be thinking about it. But these are things that go on in the mind of refugees and immigrants in our community. And this is the world in which we live. And it is challenging. It is challenging. But all of that also is based on how we portray refugees and immigrants, right? We talk about things like refugees drain our economy. Well, that's not true. In fact, refugees contribute into the betterment of the US economy. There was a report that was put out in February of 2024 by the US Department of Health and Human Services. Now, they have conducted a study over 19 years, from 2005 to 2019. And they produced this report in 2014, so just last year in February. They found out that when you take refugees and asylees, only those two groups, in that 19 years of study, they have contributed by nearly 124 billion into the net fiscal gain of the US economy. Only those two categories within those 19 years. They also found out that a refugee after arrival, 10 years of arrival, they contributed by 21,000 in tax, more than what they have received. And so this statement is just a false statement when we hear it in the community. And we should all be digging in so that when it comes, we know what to say. We also hear things like refugees are taking jobs from Americans. Well, that's true. They do work as well in our community. Now, you can interpret it as taking jobs from Americans. But the reality is that they take mostly the jobs that Americans aren't ready to do. Right? They mostly take the jobs that Americans aren't ready to do. In a report produced in 2022, again, in American Immigration Council, in that report, they found out that 15% of refugees and immigrants are in agriculture, in construction jobs. 17% of them are in the hospitality business, and 26% of them are in the agriculture. And so these are the sectors where refugees and immigrants are going, and it contributes to build a base for the general economy of the United States. And so we need to be careful when we hear those things. We also hear things like refugees are contributing into the increase of the crime rate in the nation. That also is not true. Another report, which again, I can share these resources with Gary and he can share later on, just so that you can verify those facts. But in a report that was put out by the Proceedings of the National Academy of Science in 2020, they found out that refugees are less likely to commit crime than a native born. Now, you may wonder, what does that mean? Because yes, they are always fearful. They don't want to be in the spotlight of things, and therefore they are less likely to commit crime. And they also found out that in areas where you have more refugees and immigrants, there is less crime in those areas. And so again, those are realities. Two more facts here that I want to share with you. Refugees are a threat to the national security. Well, that also is something that can be refuted. Cato Institute did a report that they put out, and it was between a research that they studied from 1975 to 2023. That's 49 years of research. They pulled all the data related to terrorism attack in the United States. 230 cases of terrorism were caused within those 49 years by a non-US born. And the total death of those 49 years from the 230 attempts of terrorism by the foreign-borns was over 3,000. Now, they deduct from that study that there is one, on a yearly basis, on those 49 years, there is one chance in 4.5 million terrorism attacks in the United States. One chance for those 4.5 million attacks to be caused by a non-US born person in a single year. 1 in 4.5 million chances. That's crazy, right? When we talk about them being terrorists and things. And then the last one here is sometimes we hear things, people can argue on where does the church or what does the Bible say about refugees and immigrants. In fact, a study that was conducted by Lifeway Research put out in January of 2024 said that 82% of Christians want their churches to to share sermon to share sermon that focuses on the biblical values regarding refugees and immigrants or regarding U.S. immigration. 70% of Christians believe they should care for refugees and foreigners. And those are the facts. Now, you may be coming here, so Medard, with all of that, what can we do? All the statistics, the things that people are saying about refugees and immigrants, what can we do? There is a lot that we can do together. Because this work cannot be done just by an agency that has a contract with the US government, which, by the way, that contract is non-existent right now. You can volunteer so many ways. Remember, some families like myself, it took 17 years before you find out about homecoming, right? And so you can befriend to your new neighbor. Walk alongside them. Just be there. Just be a friend, because they left everybody else that they know, part of their family, who may have been killed on the way through or may not be granted asylum or refugee status to come. So you can volunteer. There is so many things you can do. Help children practice, help parents understand certain things better, but also just be there. That human presence is needed. You can advocate. I shared some of these statistics with you. Advocate for better things. Advocate for the reopening of the refugee admission programs in the United States. It is necessary. Advocate for the vulnerable people, not only in our community, but worldwide. We talked about over 27% of forcibly displaced people increased since 2021 and 2025, only under 4 years, right? And so advocate, call your elected officials, talk to the people within your communities, your circle of influence. There are agencies who are doing this thing. They are doing it with less money these days. Over 30% of cut in our federal funding. But we have people in the community who need us more than ever. The needs for services, and again, those cuts are not just World Relief Western Washington. Colleges, we are in a college here. Funding that comes to colleges for things like adult educations have been cut. And so the needs for services is growing. The number of the people who need those services is growing. In fact, we are currently in a government shutdown. If the government does not reopen until the end of this month, coming November 1st, all the families who have food stamp won't have food stamp. Now, that means what? Let's just look at the 185 people that I just shared with you, who have arrived here in Thurston County. They wake up and they don't have food stamps. Some of them are still looking for jobs. Some have jobs that can help them to pay for their rent. So that's like something that may be coming our way. There is a room for all of us to advocate and to make those calls. Partner with us. Last year, we, World Relief Western Washington, started the year with a budget of just around $18 million. 85% of that budget would have come from the public funds. Only 15% is what we would have raised from the community, churches, volunteers, every single one of you in this room, and the friends that you have outside. 15%. Our working budget for FY26 is right around $10 million. So 18 million to 10 going into this new year, 85% from the public funds, and 15% last year. The 10 million that it would take for us to serve those who are here in the community, almost 50% of that amount would have to come from the community. The churches, individuals like every single one of you, which means we have to raise almost $5 million to serve refugees and immigrants in Western Washington. And that's a call that I want to leave you all with. So partner with us and give. I went a little long, but here are some resources. If you want to read some books about refugees, you have these different books. Some of them are written by World Relief staff. And so you can read some of those books. to equip yourself and to learn more about the stories of refugees and immigrants in our community. And this is the last picture here is for one of the families who have arrived here in Thurston County that we resettled. Now, I did not ask you at the beginning, how long do I have? And I'm sure I went over.
Actually, you're right on time. No, this is great. We have another 15 minutes for questions. And Gary, do you want to carry the microphone around? That would be great. I think that could I well, you get up. Uh, I will ask a quick question because you talked about the criteria that allows a person to come here seeking refuge. Is there climate crisis a criteria? Because we know that is changing worldwide, but they may not be persecuted. They may not be a political enemy of that country, but they have no means of existence anymore. What is that issue?
That is a great question, and it is a debate that many people are engaged on. The definition of the refugee that I shared with you was a definition from 1981, from the Convention of Refugee Act, 1981, and they only had those 5 criteria. Now, we do know, even though so many people, not only in our nation, but worldwide, are refuting the idea of the global climate crisis that we're in, it is also one of the causes for people having to leave, to be uprooted from where they are from. Because you cannot grow something to nourish your family. Your home is gone. There is no hope for anything new. What can you do? Being there, you will die. Can you move into a safe place? And so definitely it is a case that we've been making as an organization and advocating for it. And it needs to be considered as being it is one of the reasons why people are being forcibly displaced, but why not a ground under which someone can be given the status of refugee? That's where we also need to do that advocacy. But a great question.
I would like to ask how you pick the churches that help out. For instance, the family that we were involved with, the Baptist church downtown was the one that gave them a place to live and were involved. And so is it that somebody goes to different churches in the community and says, this is what's happening and can you help us? Is that how it's set up? I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's all of the above. We have a social media. We reach out to churches all over the region, Western Washington, and some of them invite us in. Some we go directly, and sometimes it's the connections that people had. We had a meeting 2 weeks ago with the Olympia Nazarene Church, because some people in that church know us and they invite us in to have these conversations. Tonight, we have been invited by the Olympia World Council's Affairs Council, right? And so it is through those, as we continue to have larger footprint in the community, that we get connected with people and we go in and we talk. Since January, I have visited more churches than I have ever visited in my whole life, either to share some sermon and preach, either to give some updates on where things are for us. But I do think, again, I'm not going to make any assumption here, but for us as an organization, a Christian organization that works with everybody, our faith informs how we do our work. It is a calling to love our neighbors. That's the ground on which we stand. As we love our neighbors is everyone. It's not just Christians. And so when you look at the people that we serve people from all walks of faith, no distinction. But the church is central to what we do. It is our missional calling, and therefore we cannot do this work without the church. But also we do know that the church exists in a community, and therefore the church isn't just the building, the church is the whole community together. And therefore the conversation around refugee and immigrants is a biblical conversation. It should not be a political thing. But when the church tends to stand on the sidewalk, when the conversation is happening, then the politics takes over and it becomes an uncomfortable conversation for us to have, because the politics are so loud, are louder about the issue, and therefore we think if I get into that conversation, it will be political. But in fact, instead, it is a biblical conversation. It is a faith conversation. It is the love and care and compassion for other people who are in vulnerable conditions and situations, and therefore a calling for all of us. We should not be shying away from having those conversations.
This is very powerful. Thank you.
Thanks.
Can you tell us, I'm interested in what our local elected and national leaders, I mean, by the state of Washington, city councils in Tumwater, Lacey, Olympia, because they're the, the main folks here, what their response has been to your funding cut, what Strickland and other folks are doing nationally to move this conversation along as much as possible. You get any airtime with them, that kind of what's going on politically.
That's a great question. Sorry, I did not catch your name. That's a great question. And it is a work that we continue to do. Now, for someone who has the humbling privilege to lead our offices here in Western Washington, and who also talks with other colleagues who are in other states, I am thankful to be doing this work in this state, and mainly in this community, Western Washington. And sometimes I don't share much of what is happening with others just because I know where they are at. So overall, we have a great response. We have a great community that is mostly pro-refugees and immigrants, and so therefore we get some support. When our public funding was cut by over 30%, 32%, the city of Olympia stepped in and gave us $30,000 to help with the gap that we were experiencing. And every single one of those things helped. They have been advocates looking for how do we insert certain things into the legislation and some of the appropriations and things. So we continue to have that conversation. But again, it will take all of us. Any opportunities that you have to be that voice, any opportunity that you can create space for all of us to be around the table when those discussions are happening, we would welcome those opportunities. And it is a challenge for all of us. If the government is not there for our neighbors, are we, the community members, going to stay on the sidewalk? Are we going to be passive? Or are we going to move from being passive into being active with what's happening? Can we let those who are not pro-refugees or the government dominate the conversation with the false narrations around refugees and immigrants? Or are we going to step in and take control and say that, well, no, that is not what this is about? And therefore, another call again to all of us. But yes, mostly the responses in the community have been great. The governor is looking into this eventual November 1st on if families wake up and the government is still not opening, and we were to go on a shutdown, and I mean the shutdown will continue, and we want to have funding for food stamps, what can we do? So these conversations are also happening, but also we're putting together our efforts with food banks in the communities and everybody in the community to prepare for that so that we don't leave our families go hungry.
Could you address what's happening? There's a lot of funding being cut off with the big, beautiful bill in terms of benefits that refugees are eligible for. I've kind of been following that, but I don't know all the specifics.
And your name is? Your name?
John.
Oh, John. John, that's a great question. And if you recall what I said earlier, which is that I can wake up in the morning with my team. We hear different sorts of news, and we said by the end of the day, we have a plan. Okay, tomorrow we come back, and this is what we may be doing. And then it changes. The social and political climate in which we are gets all of us confused. The big, beautiful bill is also where most of us are confused. We know that it will impact the eligibility of refugees to access certain public funding that they otherwise were eligible for. Some of them being things like, if you are in the United States for 5 years, you should not have any support from the federal government. Like things like that would impact families. Some of things as the change into the fees that people should be paying for status adjustment, let it be a refugee or an asylum seeker or an asylee. Those fees will change. Some access to the health screening that people need in order to put together their package for status adjustment, they won't be eligible for it anymore. And so there is just so much in that thing that, to be honest with you, there is more confusion than understanding of what that whole thing would look like. And again, so many great minds and heads in the room. If anybody who has certain understanding of that, please, I invite you to help us together. But yes, it is really confusing, and we're all trying to figure out day by day. Okay, okay.
Yes, can you hear me? Okay, I have a table full of Evergreen students here, I believe. Nathan, who is on our board, and his colleagues. They are in a program now about studying immigration and climate. And I was just curious if you have any reactions or questions for Medard. Because you're all, I'm putting you on the spot, Nathan. Yes, because you are studying this issue.
Sure, we'll just send it. So I guess like one thing I was talking about earlier as people were like coming into the room, and one thing I guess like we were kind of looking at in class this week, when we were talking about like the Syrian refugee crisis, when a lot of people were leaving Syria and like going into Europe. Like the Angela Merkel let in like 1 million Syrian refugees into Germany. And I guess like I think a lot of people worry about like you know, like a lot of refugees or immigrants being let into a country because they think like there will be some sort of stress on the economy, da 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 da. And you know, I feel like in some of the research that I have done and done in like previous classes, there's this institute called, I think it's like Migration Policy Institute. They do say like 7 million migrants could be let into the US every year and our economy would be fine. So I guess like what are your thoughts on like the actual, if you want to speak about like maybe like more of the actual support that like, you know, the jobs that like migrants, how they spur on our economy?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And that's where we need to keep the focus on the impact, the fiscal impact that a welcoming community is receiving from those who are joining the community. In 1980, under President Jimmy Carter, which was also the year that they signed the Refugee Act, the US Refugee Act, in 1980, that single year, United States welcomed over 200,000 refugees in 1980. Now, if you go all the way back there in 1980, we're talking about what, 46 years? 46 years. We did not have all the systems that we have right now. And if, with all those challenges, we were able to welcome over 200 million people, what makes it difficult for us today to welcome more? We shared a research of over 49 years, which showed, over 19 years, which was put out by the US Department of Health and Human Services, so a branch of the government, who showed that over those 19 years or 15 years, the net fiscal impact of refugees and asylees alone, just those two groups, was almost $124 billion. That's a positive gain. Now, the more you get refugees and immigrants, the more you have that injection into the economy. sometimes we look at the hard numbers without thinking about the value added, right? The cultural gain, the great foods. Thanks to the board, I just ate Thai food, right? When you think about all those great things that comes with having the presence of somebody else, the mind that gets opened by learning about other cultures that build us and build our community, all of that is part of the economic gain. But when people just look at the hard numbers, that's where they fall short. But there is a greater gain by welcoming somebody else in our community than keeping them away. And again, on my faith background, and I'm sharing this, some people may not be Christians, but Jesus taught his disciples, and Apostle Paul repeated something in Ephesians where he says that do not forget to show hospitality to the strangers, because by doing so, some people welcomed angels without knowing it. You don't know that person that you're welcoming in your community, the thing that they bring with them. And that's why we believe in this value of the mutually transformative relationships that are being built when we get together with other people. Funny story. I tend to talk, as you can realize. Funny story. Culturally, there is so much that we all learn. So in my first couple months, through the great volunteers from the church that World Relief connected us with. By the way, my wife, so I came 4 months before my wife. She arrived after me. 3 months after she got here, she gave birth to our very first son. So the boy who got me to learn what homecoming was. We were young parents, young couple, raising a baby without our own parents in the United States, without English language. We're just a dumb couple trying to figure out so much with our own stress. Now we have this baby who would cry every single night, and therefore it's hard. So we have sleepless nights. I was working full time, and I was going to school full time. So during the day, I'm gone. But through World Relief, we had a group of volunteers who would come and just to spend time with us, and sometimes they take the baby during the day to babysit him so that my wife can get some nap. Now, cultural learning in that season, one of the volunteers that I haven't seen for a while, and I saw her later on, and I made my first cultural mistake of my life. I saw her and said, wow, you look good. You put some meat on. Now, I learned right away that you don't say things like that in America, especially not to a woman. You don't tell them that you're gaining weight. Now, where I come from, now you get it right. You're like, wait, what is he talking about? Now, where I come from, a sign of being healthy is when you are all round, right? You have less problems. You have something to eat, because not everybody had something to eat. In fact, I grew up, some days I wake up and I don't know if I will get something to eat before going to bed. And so when you see that, it is a compliment. But I did not know that culturally in America, people jump back on those kind of things. And so it happened, and it was a moment of learning. And she taught me that, no, Medard, you don't say things like that to people in America. But also she learned that in another culture, that's a compliment. It was a good thing because I was able to tell her as well where I was coming with that, right? And so there are those values that are not just the hard numbers of dollars that people can look at. There is so much that as community we gain by being together.
Thank you, Medard. Very good story. Very good story. Let's thank. And then I have there's another question over there, and then I have a few closing comments. I think Susan, another board member. Thank you.
Thanks very much for being here and for your presentation. I have a question about the organization in Thurston County and the extent to which you know about another organization called Enterprise for Equity and are working together. It's an organization that works with refugees and low-income people in these communities to build their own businesses. And we have some great examples in Thurston County where low-income individuals started businesses that are now supporting the community as a whole.
Yeah, humbly speaking, I don't know. I have not heard about them. And this is why we do take these opportunities not lightly, because we learn as we go through. And at the end of the day, what we do understand and we do know is that it is only through collaboration and partnership that we can create something more beautiful in our communities. And so really interested in that. I don't know if Natalie knows something about them, but I personally do not. And so, Susan, I would be interested in hearing more about that.
We'll definitely connect you.
Thank you.
And here are a couple of comments I have at the end, because you mentioned about some studies that you might share with Gary about refugee information. And that information, if you can send it to us, we will put it on our website and you can have access to it also. Also on our website, Gary routinely posts a think piece, and he did write about Sudan. And the next one coming up, amazingly, is about landmines that are, it's on there today. So there's good information on our website. Also on the website, Pete, who's our president, if you'd raise your hand, he works with our Global Connect group, which Gary also helps with, which is a think group that reads a couple of pieces about global issues and then is on Zoom to talk about it maybe every couple weeks or so. Every 2 weeks. So there's something important on that website for you to look at. And couple more things. The students here, thank you for coming from Evergreen, and also students from St. Martin's and from SPSCC can qualify for the scholarships that Olympia World Affairs Council grants to them. We are giving $1,000 to each college for one of their students to study abroad. And if all of you have donated to that scholarship fund, I really want to thank you, because we have student applications coming in this fall. And we'll know more about who went and what they learned next year. And last but not least, next month's program, as you can see on the flyer on the table, will be about Justice Beyond Borders, International Efforts to End Nuclear Weapons by Joanna Dufour. I hope you all will join us next month, the third Thursday, same time, same place. And we'll learn about another issue. And Gary still has his hand up. Okay, thank you, Gary. What's up?
Yeah, just to follow up on Medard, we'd like to invite you guys back in February for a meeting. If you're interested in Sudan, we have Dr. Christopher Tunzel, who's the director of the African Studies at the University of Washington, who is coming down to speak on the Sudanese. It'll be the third Thursday of the month. He's coming down to talk.
Thank you, Medard, again, about a very informative presentation and information. And all of you have a safe drive home tonight. Thank you.